Hi, the introverted cynist here. Today, I am going to explain a 2009 Norwegian comedy horror film called Dead Snow. Warning, spoilers ahead. Kick back and take care. The movie begins with a lady, Sarah, being pursued through the snows of Norway. She tries to outrun them, but later slips and rolls down the hill and is eventually cornered and eaten by zombies wearing World War II Nazi uniform. The following day, in the snowy mountains of Norway, 7 medical students journey to a cabin to enjoy their Easter vacation. The cabin is owned by Sarah, Vegard's girlfriend, who is expected to join the group soon. The group arrives at the destination, but the cabin is located inside the woods. Vegard then takes out his snowmobile and informs the gang to follow his bike trail to the cabin, which is a 45-minute long walk, and there is no mobile reception along the way. He drove the bike at full throttle and reached the cabin. After reaching, Vegard reminisces the good times he had with Sarah before entering and then heats up the place. Later on, the group starts to have fun and frolic around the place with the snowmobile and fight with snowballs. While playing, a mysterious hiker arrives for a cup of coffee and says it was stupid of them to come here with the snowmobile without learning the local history of the place. He lets them know the dark history of the locale. During World War II, a force of Einsatzs, led by Colonel Hartzog, occupied the region. For quite some time, the National Socialists mishandled and tormented the neighborhood individuals. The civilians went through hell. Close to the furthest limit of the war, with Germany's loss approaching, the officers plundered every one of the town's resources. Notwithstanding, all the 3,000 residents arranged an uprising and trapped them, and killed many with axes, knives and shovels. The survivors, including Hartzog, were driven away into the mountains, and it was expected that they all froze to death. The group felt uninterested, concerned and sleepy. During the story, Roy adds a snide comment making the stranger pull out and leave. Later, Vegard wakes up in the middle of the night, where he sees Sarah standing still outside the front door, covered in blood. It was then revealed that it was a nightmare, and he feels anxious about her. Meanwhile, the hiker is seen in a secluded area in a tent, having his dinner when suddenly, he hears a noise outside and asks who it is. He then steps outside with his gun and torch to inquire and walks a few steps, but suddenly his throat gets slit open and rushes to the tent for shelter, but is accosted by a zombie and stabbed several times, killing him. Next day, Vegard packs his bag and sets out to look for Sarah and informs Martin and Hannah if he does not come back, follow the bike trail back to their car, and hands Martin the keys to the cabin and leaves. Along the way, Vegard finds a tent and decides to explore if any person is present, but suddenly falls back after witnessing the corpse of the hiker. Vegard, now panting, sees a trail of footprint and blood along the way and decides to follow it. At the cabin, Hannah accidentally makes a cut on her finger, but, ironically, even though being a medical student, Martin becomes uncomfortable seeing blood and Roy mocks him for it. Just then, Erland, while searching for more beer, stumbles upon a box where gold coins and several souvenirs were kept, but Martin informs the rest not to look at it until Sarah and Vegard are present and closes it. At this moment, Vegard, while searching and shouting for Sarah, accidentally falls into a pit, knocking him unconscious. As expected, the gang, now drunk, messes around with the souvenirs, but Martin instructs them to stop and says it does not belong to them, but Roy says to use the gold to pay off their student loan and debates about it. Just then, mischievously, Hannah slips in a gold coin to Martin's pants without him knowing. Erland says to the gang he is going to poop, and while entering the restroom he drops a gold coin on the ground. Just then, Chris joins in and the pair kisses and have fun. Meanwhile, a zombie hand now collects the coin from the ground. After a while, Erland enters the cabin feeling excited, but Chris, now using the restroom, has been targeted by a zombie and grabs hold onto her. However, Chris, now injured, tries to crawl out and yells for help. Vaguely hearing this, Hannah goes outside to check on her, but unfortunately, Chris gets taken and is out of sight. Looking at Hannah's anxiety, the guys decide to step outside with a gun and torch to look for Chris, but finds a bag buried in the snow and returns it to the cabin and says Chris cannot be found anywhere. After inspection, they conclude that the bag belongs to Sarah and fears that she could be lost and decides to look for her in the forest. Hannah, now looking out the window, witnesses Chris's head on a person's hand and screams out loud and informs the rest about it, then locks and barricades the door. They are now surrounded by Nazi zombies, and the gang start to panic as to what to do next. Just then, the lights start to flicker and the cabin starts to vibrate. Suddenly the zombies try to break into the cabin. At the same time Hannah chops off a hand, splashing blood all over her face. Hannah, unbalanced, takes the hand to Martin, saying that the story the hiker said was all true and needs to get to the car. In a second, Erlen gets caught and is being dragged through the window. The gang tries to save him, but the zombie cracks open his head and brains out. The gang now helplessly watches him being dragged out and devoured. The next morning, the remaining 4 students decide to split up. The 2 men, Martin and Roy, attempt to distract the zombies, while the 2 women, Hannah and Liv, run for the cars and go for help. In another development, Vegard wakes up and tries to explore the pit and finds a way out and sees his bike outside. He then fires up a wood stick and comes around in the cave, discovering a Nazi flag, firearms, helmets as well as Sarah's severed head. He is attacked, but escapes to the surface, where he is confronted by a zombie. The zombie pulls out a knife to stab him, but counters it. Vegard then uses the helmet to blow the zombie's head several times and knocks him out. While resting on the ground, suddenly a hand shows up beneath the snow, revealing a second assailant. Vegard gets punched to the edge of the cliff, but gets hold of the knife and stabs it to the zombie's eye and kicks it to a tree bark, piercing its intestines. Just then, the first zombie wakes up and knocks him from the cliff side. Vegard is bitten in the neck by the zombie, whilst the 2 hang from the cliff using an intestine as rope. Vegard, with overwhelming strength, headbutts the zombie off the cliff. En route to the cars, the girls get ambushed and run separate ways. Liv is knocked out by a zombie and awakens to him pulling out her intestines. Using an M24 stick grenade, she commits suicide and kills her assailant. Colonel Hartzog watches everything through a binocular and orders his men to charge. Hannah leads a zombie to a cliff edge, breaks the ice, and they fall. The pair survive, and much to her surprise, the zombie is stuck in the snow. Hannah then finally kills the zombie. Martin and Roy accidentally set fire to the cabin with cocktails. They escape and arm themselves with power tools. Vegard now climbs back to the snowmobile, stitches his wounds, and mounts a MG-34 machine gun to his snowmobile and drifts off to the cabin. Martin and Roy, with all their might, charges and kills as many zombies as they can. Later more zombies attack, but they are aided by Vegard. Vegard uses the machine gun to kill the zombies. Unfortunately, during the attack, Vegard gets killed, and Martin, while viciously stabbing a zombie, accidentally kills Hannah, who has returned to the cabin. Hartzog arrives, leading a group of zombies. They attack, and Martin is bitten on the arm. To avoid becoming infected, he cuts off his arm with a chainsaw. After killing the remaining undead, Martin and Roy are about to attack Hartzog, who calls upon hundreds of zombies that rise from under the snow. Being completely outnumbered, Martin and Roy run from their attackers. Roy, while running, gets hit in the head by a hammer, disemboweled by a tree branch, and killed by Hartzog, who retrieves a watch from his pocket. Martin realizes now that it was the treasure that they wanted and rushes to the burned-down cabin and digs for the wooden box and returns the box to Hartzog and escapes. After running for a while, Martin, now lethargic, falls down next to a river and rests. Fortunately, he spots his car and rushes into it. Martin, now overjoyed, when inserting his key, drops a gold coin in his pocket. Just then, Hartzog smashes the window of the car. If you liked today's video, subscribe and leave a like to help YouTube know you are enjoying this channel. Thanks for watching.